Who doesn't love live music? Concerts, gigs, festivals, each of them making up a huge part of the music culture of their time. Each generation has their defining live show. For the 60s, you had Hendrix at Woodstock, the 80s, Queen at Live Aid, the 90s, Limp Bizkit at Woodstock 99, and the 2010s, Alex at Glastonbury. Truth be told, live music is hard work, especially when putting together a large-scale festival event. There's a lot of logistical issues that come into play when you cram 500,000 people in a field somewhere. Food, water, medical tents, security, accommodation, floor plans, stage layouts, wait, we have to pay the staff, sanitation, festival lineups, festival lines, parking, and that's just the stuff that you can plan in advance, let alone all the things that are completely out of the organizer's control. Drug consumption, violence, destruction of property, people burning stuff, people getting burnt by stuff, people just climbing stuff, extreme heat, extreme rain, flooding, too many people rocking up, too few people rocking up, people rocking up without any of the artists rocking up because your whole festival was a scam. Wait, how are you allowed to do this again? Screw it, I'm so in. The point I'm trying to make here is that large-scale concerts and festivals require diligent planning, thorough organization, and a bit of luck. This is what makes the festivals of the 60s so interesting to me. The grand spectacle of the music festival that we're used to today wasn't really a thing yet. There were only a handful of festivals that had occurred by the late 60s. Monterey Pop Festival in 67, Miami Pop Festival in 68, and a few others were popularizing the idea of the great open-air American music festival. But remember how I said that festivals require diligent planning and organization? You should probably see a doctor if you don't. Yeah, that wasn't really a thing yet. For example, the Monterey Pop Festival of 67 was planned by John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas, along with a few other music industry associates. Now generally, the planning of a festival of this size, if it were done today, would take about a year. How long did it take them to plan Monterey, a festival that had never been done before? 7 weeks. 7 weeks to organize a festival that housed 90,000 people. And it was a success. The festival went off without any major issues, everyone had fun, almost all the bands rocked up. Now this sets the scene for the Rolling Stones in 1969. It was a strange year for them. Brian Jones, their former guitarist, had left the band and subsequently passed away a few months later in July. They finished recording their 8th studio album, Let It Bleed, which would go on to be one of the band's most acclaimed and celebrated albums. They embarked on their first US tour since 1966, now playing in stadiums full of fans instead of in smaller venues and theaters. In addition to the Stones touring, Woodstock also happened in August of 1969. Most historians regard Woodstock as the pinnacle of the hippie era, the defining moment of 60s culture. And whilst Woodstock was a disaster in its own right, the lack of violence meant that the festival was widely regarded as a grand success of peace and love by the rest of the country. But back to the Rolling Stones. Throughout their tour, they were witnessing journalists complain that their ticket prices were too high. Perhaps it was through fear of irrelevancy or wanting to capitalize on the peace, love and freedom attitude off the back of Woodstock. The Stones felt they needed to be part of this new wave of festival culture. And so, less than 2 months out from the event, the group started planning an outdoor concert festival. And that's planning with 2 massive sarcastic quotation marks around it. They got in contact with another band, the Grateful Dead, who along with their manager assisted in the planning of the event. Hot off the back of Woodstock, they wanted this event to rival it. They wanted it to be the Woodstock of the West. So let's look at logistics. Okay, number 1, attending artists. These guys, done, easy. Okay, next, security. Well, we don't really like cops at these festivals, they kinda jack the vibe. Members of the Grateful Dead pitched in. Oh no, we've used the Hells Angels before. You used a bikie gang for security. Yeah, dude, dirt cheap as well. Just offer them like $500 worth of beer and they'll keep everyone in order. On the suggestion of the members of the Grateful Dead, the Stones hired Hells Angels gang members as the security for the festival. A very peace and love decision, which would ultimately cause the event to turn to chaos. Who would have thought? Okay, next, location. Golden State Park in San Francisco. Look at all that space, perfect. Except, no. There's a football game happening at Kezar Stadium that would clash with the event. Plus, locals are sick of all these damn hippies hanging around and refuse to give the Stones any permits. Damn it. Okay, plan B. Sears Point Raceway near Sonoma, a beautiful empty location that'll be able to house even more than they were expecting to attend. Surely there's no issues with this, right? Well, there was one, but not what you'd expect. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that this event was to be filmed and documented by the Maysles brothers, 2 popular documentary filmmakers who struck a deal with the Stones months prior to the event. The catch was, they had to be there filming, mainly because they wanted the final version of the film released before the Woodstock documentary, which was scheduled for early the next year. Now, Sears Point Raceway was owned by Filmways Incorporated, a film and television production company who demanded $100,000 up front from the Rolling Stones as a result of the film taking place on their soil. Obviously, this wasn't going to happen, so Once again, the location had to be moved. Okay, plan C. Local businessman Dick Carter suggested the event be hosted at his Altamont Raceway, just outside of Tracy. It was far from ideal, but it was able to fit large numbers of attendees. Now this was good, they finally found a location. The problem was, the event was on December 6th. This venue change happened on December 4th. 2 days. They had 2 days to essentially plan the whole festival again at this new venue. Now this venue was riddled with logistical issues. For starters, there was only one long road to enter the raceway, meaning most attendees needed to park miles away and travel in on foot. But the bigger issue was the stage layout. See, the idea was that the stage would sit at the bottom of a hill with the crowd looking down on them. In theory, a good idea. After all, most concert halls and amphitheaters have the audience higher than the performers. Problem was, the stage was built with the previous location in mind, where it was meant to sit atop a hill with the audience looking up, meaning that the stage was built to be really low. This was now a huge problem because you essentially had a stage that was barely higher than the crowd, which meant hardly any separation between them and the performers. Boy, I sure hope security know what they're doing.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Heaps of last-minute decisions had to be made with other aspects of the event. Stuff like portable toilets, medical tents, and lighting and sound layouts were all thrown together at the last minute, resulting in an event that had no real layout or planning. Staff later stated that they had no idea who was even in charge or who to report to. But alas, the day came and the show must go on. The day started rather smoothly. People herded along the one main road leading to the venue. Santana was up first, and their set went pretty well. The crowd and the Hells Angels were still pretty tame at this point, but as the day went on, the situation deteriorated quickly. So it turns out, when you pay people with beer, they get drunk. And when people get drunk, they get violent. And when those drunk, violent people also have weapons, people start getting hurt. As a result of the poorly planned stage layout, crowd members were pouring towards the stage. At this point, the medical tent was starting to fill up, not only with injuries, but also because of a bad batch of LSD that was making its way through the crowd, resulting in what medical staff at the event described as mass toxic psychosis. Okay, so you know how at big concerts and festivals now you have a fence separating the crowd and the stage? Okay, at Altamont, this fence wasn't a fence. The Hells Angels just parked their bikes there as a makeshift barrier. Of course, during Jefferson Airplane's set, a crowd member toppled one of the bikes, which set off a few of the Hells Angels, who then started a fight in the crowd. The band's lead singer, Marty Balin, jumped into the crowd to help break up the fight, only to be knocked unconscious by a Hells Angels member. Other members of the Angels then got on stage and started arguing with the band in the middle of their set.
Hey man, I'd like to mention that the Hells Angels just smashed Marty Balin in the face and knocked him out for a bit. I'd like to thank you for that.
You're talking to me, I'm going to talk to you.
I'm not talking to you, man. I'm talking to the people that hit my lead singer in the head.
You're talking to my people.
Right.
Now let me tell you what's happening.
During Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Stephen Stills was repeatedly stabbed in the leg by a stoned-out Angel. At this point, the Grateful Dead were hearing word of the chaos that was unfolding and had no intention of being part of it, so they just sort of dipped. Since one of the key acts was no longer playing, there was an excruciating 2-hour gap before the Stones was scheduled. During this time, more fights broke out between the Angels and the crowd. The Stones arrived at the venue and within 2 minutes, Mick Jagger was punched in the face. When it came time for their set, the crowd had reached a boiling point. The set was chaos. The band had to constantly stop in the middle of songs to urge the crowd to calm down.
People, who's fighting what for? Who's fighting and what for? We don't want to fight. Come on.
During this chaos, an 18-year-old Meredith Hunter tried twice to get on the stage, the second time drawing a revolver from his jacket, upon which he was stabbed and killed by a Hells Angel. He was one of 4 deaths at the event, 2 of which were a result of a hit-and-run car accident, and another who drowned in a drainage canal whilst high on LSD. Jagger noticed someone wounded on the ground and paused the show asking for a doctor, but began playing again a few minutes later. Jagger later claimed that they didn't want to abandon their set out of fear of inciting a full-scale riot. So, purely out of fear, they continued to play till the end of their set. The aftermath of the event was brutal. Medical staff told Rolling Stone, the magazine, not the band, about the carnage they witnessed on the day. They said they treated more than 700 acid-induced freakouts and dozens, if not hundreds, of lacerations and fractures, most of which the Angels were responsible for. The event was heavily contrasted against Woodstock. Altamont didn't uphold the peace and love culture of the other festivals before it, and became a shining example of the issues associated with the hippie movement in general. Rock historian Ed Ward stated, Meredith Hunter died at Altamont, but a generation's faith in itself was mortally wounded. It didn't help that the event occurred only a few months after the infamous Manson murders, which brought equally as much criticism towards the hippie movement and rock and roll music. More conservative-minded Americans were beginning to see events like these as a byproduct of the movement itself, which of course placed more pressure on rock and roll music as one of the key contributors to this anarchy. As a result, some state and local officials across the country started taking steps to ban future rock festivals. However, even the ones that weren't outright banned had to be heavily managed. No more were festivals just thrown together by band members a few months before. Festivals and large-scale concerts were now fully organised and eventually commercialised affairs. The Altamont disaster contrasted everything at the heart of 60s music culture. It proved the reality that anarchy had a bad side, and most Americans were on board with the idea that no longer could this chaotic counterculture have free reign over the country's youth. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for what's to come. I'd love to keep talking to you, but my plane leaves for Fyre Festival too real soon, so I gotta make my way to the airport.